This is TomSlickTV.com.
Are you ready?
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
You ready?
You can't handle
The naked truth.
Welcome. For those who do not know, I'm Elder Mmoja Ajabu, your host for After Naked Truth. This program is dedicated to stripping the clothes off of well-dressed lies. And there's a bunch of well-dressed lies running around here. But for that reason, this program is X-rated. It's X-rated because the truth will not have on any clothes. I am unbought, unbossed, unafraid, truly unleashed to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the butt-naked truth. Today on the program, we have an author who actually is a friend of my daughter. I mean, I've watched her grow and develop and become a person renowned. Natalie Hopkinson. Natalie has written a book, several books. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. And she wants to talk about her latest book, A Mouth is always muzzled. A mouth is always muzzled. And what I want to do initially is to have her to give some biological background, and then we'll get into the topic about how to unmuzzle that mouth. So, Natalie, again, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
I am so happy to see you. It's wonderful to be back in Indianapolis. I remember growing up going to Kwanzaa at your house.
Exactly.
And lots of sleepovers at Nzinga's house. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really happy to be here.
Good. Give the people your resume somewhat as to what you've done after high school.
Okay. So I attended Howard University along with your daughter as well in Washington, D.C. in 1994. I went on a journalism scholarship. So I worked for Cox newspapers while I was during undergrad, and they paid for me my college tuition and everything. And after that, I worked for the Washington Post for about 5 years as an arts writer, culture writer. Then I went to University of Maryland, College Park to do my PhD. And so I've basically been back and forth between the academy and working in journalism. So I was an editor at theroot.com. After I did my PhD, I worked with Henry Louis Gates in launching that web magazine. I was the media and culture critic there. I also have worked as a fellow at the Interactivity Foundation, where I'm still a fellow.
Okay.
And I'm now teaching at Howard University. I'm back to my alma mater. So yes, so I'm teaching in the PhD program in Communication, Culture, and Media Studies. And so I've been there for about a year and a half. So still doing writing, still doing research, and I'm also a columnist for the Huffington Post. So I'm doing a bi-monthly column.
Well, you are a lady renowned. I want to get into your book, and I read the information with interest, because you're looking at the art basically in Guyana, to my understanding, and how it's been used traditionally as a tool to speak revolution where other people could not speak the revolution, and so they spoke it through their art. Say more about that.
Yes, I think, one of the ways to think about it is just, you're talking about the title, A Mouth is Always Muzzled. So that is actually taken from a Guyanese poet named Martin Carter. And the full stanza of that poem goes, "A mouth is always muzzled by the food it eats to live." So every mouth is muzzled. So you really, one of the bigger themes is that every mouth is muzzled. I dare say even your mouth is muzzled because you're eating. And so there are
My
compromises
look.
that you have to make in order to eat.
My father used to say, "Let the food stop your mouth." You know. So yes, my mouth is muzzled,
Your mouth is muzzled.
when I eat.
Yes, in order to keep the food coming, there are certain things that compromises you have to make. There are certain jobs you have to take. And this is not just for artists.
I wasn't looking at it
It's
like
for
that.
everyone. It's not just artists.
Yes,
it's for everyone.
Yes.
And so in your
let me
quest
feed
for
that back to you.
survival,
What you're actually saying is that if you want to eat, then there's certain compromises that you got to make, especially if you're talking about revolution, to whereas that you, they say now, if you're going to be a revolutionary, we'll stop your capability to eat.
That's
and
right.
So you have to muzzle that mouth so that we can keep the oppression going.
That's right. So it's talking about the basic need to survive, but it's also talking about the need to speak out, though. So you want so it affects. So you're going to pull some punches if your checks are going to stop coming, and if you cannot feed your family. I know that everybody's made compromises in this sense. So
Unfortunately.
the artists, but it's part of the human condition. Every mouth has to eat.
That needs to change.
It needs to change, but that does not stop people from speaking out. And so the artists in my book that I profile, I picked some very extraordinary example of artists who have used art as a platform to speak out and to be unmuzzled. So the arts, the letters, and so a lot of it is loosely based around Guyana, South America, where both my parents are from Guyana. So it's loosely based there, but it travels. So I have a writer in London, and I have another artist in New York, and I'm going back to Guyana, and I'm looking at the cultural festivals, and really looking at two artists in particular who are contemporary artists in Guyana, and looking at how they navigate, which was a really, really crazy election in Guyana, where dissidents were killed, where there was a lot of oppression. And in a place like Guyana, which is pretty small, it's 800,000 people on the northern tip of South America, the struggle is very extreme. You know, you could really see some of these issues come to the forefront. So that's what I'm dealing with my book.
And that's an excellent point with your book. And one of the things which is a peeve of mine, and we talked about this a little earlier before starting the program, is that artists and academicians become armchair revolutionaries. You read their stuff and you say, wow, but you look at what they do, non-existent.
What are they doing in their own life?
Right.
And so, one of the characters in my book is Walter Rodney, who is a Guyanese historian who was assassinated in 1980. He is the opposite of the armchair revolutionary. He was a revolutionary. He's probably one of the few people I could say that maybe has never, I don't think his mouth has ever been muzzled. And he's been kicked out of multiple countries. You know, his Black Power lectures and agitating around the Black Power movement got him kicked out of Jamaica. That led to 4 days of rioting and the Walter Rodney riots of 1968, which they're celebrating the 50th anniversary of that. So he was kicked out of Jamaica. He was banned, and partly because he was lecturing about Black Power, and also because he was hanging with Rastas, which in 1968 that was not something that polite company did.
Right.
They were they're sort of cute, but back then they were sort of the dregs of society, and nobody could understand why.
Because he was out there making that smoke, right?
Right. Which somehow we've reconsidered what the smoke is, right? So somehow they weren't that crazy, were they? Right? So everybody,
legalize it.
everybody's coming to see their wisdom now. But at the time, it was very bold for somebody of his position who had gotten his PhD from the University of London, you know, very well, you know, established academic, brilliant writer. You know, at the time, he was not supposed to be consorting with the regular folk.
Right.
And they found it to be very threatening. And so, you know, with the Cold War, there was a lot of pressure. He had been tracked by the U.S. and Great Britain. They had been tracking his movements ever since undergrad.
Thought he was colluding with Russia?
Yes, because he had visited Russia, he had visited Havana, Cuba, and basically was ready for the revolution to happen at any moment, and he was pushing for revolution right until his untimely end in 1980.
And I think that they use death as a tool to keep the muzzle on the mouth.
Absolutely.
That should be speaking truth to power.
That's right.
And Walter Rodney, who was unapologetic, and he's got a quote. In doing my research, he says every African has a responsibility to understand the system and to work toward its overthrow.
That's right.
Because if you understand the system, then you understand the system is about systematic oppression of people of color, especially if you're of African descent.
That's right. And he was someone who, his most famous text was How Europe Underdeveloped Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the work that he did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, helping us to understand how it's not us. These are things that, we're in a framework, we're in a global framework that is working against us,
Mm-hmm.
With white domination and white supremacy that is working against us. And so his work was really exemplar in doing exactly what that quote said. And that's why as we were talking earlier, I feel like he could have stayed on the arm a little bit more. I kind of wish he did, because we might have had 10 more How Europe Underdeveloped Africas. And, so it's like, there is a balance, I think. I think you can sometimes it might be prudent to pull some punches in order to have some sort of longevity, but you're right in that you cannot allow the fear of death to stop you from seeking justice and for accepting a situation that is not acceptable.
See, I would take a little bit of issue with what you just said, because I think there's another solution. Instead of doing the compromise and putting the muzzle on the mouth, I think there needs to be more organization to where it's that if we come together, then our voice can speak and not be snuffed out.
That's right.
Because we stand around and protect that voice so that voice can speak. When you look at our oppressors, they say what they want to say. And they do what they want to do. Because they feel like that, well, if somebody comes to try to harm me, I got the police.
Right.
I got the National Guard. I got the U.S. Army, the Navy. I got the CIA. I got the FBI. And so I'm saying that in order for us to overcome our oppression, and see, people like to say that slavery died, was eradicated. No, we're still enslaved today. I mean, we live better in our enslavement. But in slavery, the slave master could go out and shoot us down, beat us down, kill us with impunity.
And that's the same situation we have. And I think that you bring up a good point about the single voice. I think that's one of the lessons from the chapter that I have on Walter Rodney too, as well as all the other, the whole book as well, is that one voice can get snuffed out. Right. And so, but if you have the organization where you're together, it's much more difficult to snuff out. As one of the writer at the Washington Post, Wes Lowry, who's done some Pulitzer Prize winning work on police brutality, his book is called "They Can't Kill Us All." And I
they'll
think
try.
They can try.
Right.
They can try.
But if we have the right attitude, they will not be successful.
But it's also like, are we living? Is what we're doing living? That's the question I'm always thinking about. Where you're afraid to get shot down in the streets. Is that living? No. I don't know.
No. If you live your life in fear, then you're not living, you're existing. Now, Frantz Fanon spoke about how we have to create the mindset towards that we refuse to live beneath our humanity. If we muzzle our mouth, then what we're doing is we're decreasing the right of our humanity. And to the degree that we decrease our right to humanity is to the degree that we will accept oppression. So the question that I have for your generation is, are we willing to get organized? And I see, as an old revolutionary, I'm really elated that Colin Kaepernick took a knee. The brothers that played for the Sacramento Kings out in California decided to make a promo concerning the death of the brother that got shot trying to get into his grandparents' back door by the police. I see how Philando Castile's executioners have gotten off. And I'm saying that someone as proficient as yourself, and not only you, there's a lot of y'all have taken development to a new level when you talk about our people. The question is the revolutionary zeal there that will stop our people from fighting our people for the benefit of our oppressors just because of the quality of our lives?
Well, I think that's a very deep question. I mean, I want to just trouble one thing that you said before about how putting the muzzle on it denies our humanity.
Decreases.
I would actually say that it's part of our humanity. You know, the fact that we have to, the fact that we have to eat is part of the human struggle, and every mouth is muzzled. I believe that Trump's mouth is muzzled. And
you think so?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there are other strings being pulled that are pressing on him. Every mouth is muzzled.
I think it might be
not enough.
Coming. No, I think he might understand. See, in my opinion, America politicians are liars, and they're good liars because they can tell a lie and make you believe it's the truth. Trump also is a liar, but he's not a politician. He's a businessman, and so Trump is white, male, rich, and used to privilege. And so with those four categories, he's used to being able to say what he wants to say and not have to be concerned about how you feel about or how it impacts you because he's white, male,
but what I'm saying, even in his case,
rich,
but he's
and used to privilege.
But he's getting some heat that he has never had, and he's never experienced in his whole life.
Yes.
Like right now, watch what happens with this FBI. Like he's coming for the FBI. Good luck with that, sir. Because the FBI, they're not about 4-year term. They're not about an 8-year term. These are career professionals, and they're going to be leaking. No, and they're also liars, but they're going to be leaking dirt on Trump and all his children and his grandchildren. The worst thing that he could have done was what he did to take away that man's pension. He's probably radicalized. He created every
an enemy.
Person. No, he created a whole class of enemies because they're like a gang. They support each other and they close ranks.
Right.
And Nixon thought he could go back against law enforcement too, and that didn't go too well for him.
Yeah.
So let's see what happens. So he's got pressures that he's never had. The thing is, when you're a business person, as he has, you can hide behind. You can hide behind your tower. You can hide behind these
for a while.
These agreement. Actually, for the whole life, he could if he hadn't gone into politics, he could have just continued doing. And I don't know that he's a businessman. I'd say he's more like a con artist. Actually.
Well, that's business.
That's not. Yeah, I guess that's part of it. But he's more like a con artist.
Right.
And so he could go ahead and perpetuate all of these frauds when it's in the private sector. But now that he's in the public sector, he's experiencing a heat that he's never experienced before.
See, now watch this. See, the public sector is propagating a fraud also, but they're a better liar. And this is the point that I was trying to make previously. Trump is used to being raw. The politician knows that he's got to tell or she's got to tell the lie, but she's got to tell it so people believe that it's the truth.
Yes.
When you look at the situation of that woman that just got exonerated today because her husband went into the nightclub and killed, 40-some people.
Yeah.
And they said, she had to know. She was living in the room with them. And what you find out that she was exonerated because the FBI did not tape any of the interview that they done with her. They lied on her and said that she went with her husband to case the nightclub, and come to find out that the nightclub was chosen at the spur of the moment because they go into that place to tear up and kill people because security was so high. So you had the FBI and the government lying on this woman because somebody has got to pay for these white people that got killed in this club.
And it's very selective at who has to pay for what. Yes.
They call it a picnic. When something happens to a white person, then they go and pick a nick to pay for it.
Somebody has to pay, and they decide.
And unfortunately, too many times we have been the nick that they pick. Always.
And I mean, you know more than anyone that the FBI and actually law enforcement, they don't need a court of law.
No.
They don't need a justice system.
No.
All they need is the media. So they work through the media and they do their trial by media, trial by links. They shape public perception, and then the justice system follows after that. So it's all a PR game to them.
It's a way of life that they have created to be the norm. But their norm is not normal.
No, it's not.
And this is the reason why I say that if you go for their norm, it's the culture that you need to muzzle yourself in order to eat. Well, if to some degree. So if you go for that, then what you're doing is depreciating your humanity, because you ought to be able to speak the truth, and the truth ought to be able to prevail, and we all should be trying to live the truth and not tell a lie so that we can eat.
I think there's some room in between, so I don't think it's just it's a state of being muzzled or unmuzzled. I think everybody is in various stages of being muzzled. So it's more about like managing the human condition. Your lights have to stay on. If you're a parent, your lights have to stay on. You've got to feed your children. And, by the way, all the muzzling that's happened in the black community, that's why we still here. We should be gone by now. And that's what they want. I mean, we should not exist as a people anymore. And that's partly because of some of the sacrifices that people have made. But at the same time, and what my book is about is really looking at how artists are, despite all of that, and despite the economic oppression, despite the history of slavery and oppression, in spite of the lack of economic opportunity, writers, intellectuals are still speaking out. And so I'm saying if these folks in Guyana, South America, which is the second poorest country behind Haiti in the Western Hemisphere, which has an incredible history of oppression, if these artists are able to speak out, surely Mmoja Ajabu and Natalie Hopkinson, sitting here in Indianapolis, can speak out.
Well, I think we do, and Lord knows I do, and your book does. But the question becomes is for me, and I wrestle with it. I don't like that muzzle.
No, nobody likes it.
And so I refuse to put that muzzle on me. And there's repercussions for that. There's repercussions. I think my son might be in prison right now.
That's the argument that I made. Yes, in my other book, Deconstructing Tyrone. Yes,
because of the lack of the muzzle.
That's right.
He might still be in prison right now because of the lack of the muzzle. But
they almost killed him because of the lack of the muzzle.
Yeah,
because they went for the death penalty.
Which you don't see. People don't know how I was ran off the road during all that situation, You know,
so we're talking about in the 90s with the
95,
Debo, yes, Debo Ajabu.
Yes,
and another one of my good friends.
Yes,
another one of my good friends from high school.
But to put Tad to your book, Walter Rodney experienced death because he refused to be muzzled. Martin Luther King experienced death because he refused to be muzzled to the degree that they wanted him to be muzzled. Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, and the list goes on and will continue to go on. But that is the price of freedom. And when we make up our minds to say enough is enough, then we will pay that price and we will have our freedom. I think, in fact, I know that the election of Donald Trump is making us talk about, are we willing, and think about, are we willing to pay that price? Because if he makes America great again, with all of the wealth and the quality of life that we have achieved because we were willing to take so much, we wouldn't speak about it, from slavery to where we are now, he's going to enslave us in that big old fine house, with us driving that big old car, with us having all those clothes in the closet. He's going to enslave us and oppress us, and all of that stuff that we have achieved because we muzzled ourselves will mean nothing.
And it's not just black people that are muzzled. Like, more than half of our country is comprised of women. and he's also oppressing women in a very very profoundly unacceptable way. I think that there are a lot of white people who are also ready to take up the revolution as well. And so I think that, part of it has to be that we have to find allies, we have to be organized. And speaking of in our generation, another one of our friends from our crew from high school is Allison Brown, and she runs the Community for Just Schools Fund. I mean, she's doing some really powerful work in organizing, so she is the link that they're funding a lot of these organizations and training all these youth organizations, and they're working in schools specifically. So it's the Communities for Just Schools Fund. So they have a whole network all around the country, and they're doing a lot of this work. They're doing this organizing work, So that has to be part of it as well. And so I'm hoping, but it can't just be one person, right? It can't be just one person who's doing it. And one thing I have to say about Walter Rodney, the thing that my research came up is that the narrative actually about his death is not
clear.
Well, it's not clear, and there's some pretty good evidence that one of his comrades who was working with him, well, yes, definitely, but that it was an accident, actually, that he was trying to get a bomb with a remote control bomb, and this is what happened. So this is what one of his comrades, who's still in Guyana right now, that's what he told.
That's his story.
Well, that's what he slipped up and told a writer a few years ago, and so that never sort of came back to the surface. So there's more evidence that it might have been the narrative around his death might not have been exactly what we sort of think. But in any case, so C.L.R. James, after he died, he was very critical because C.L.R. James was one of his mentors, and he said Walter Rodney never should have been there. He was very upset. He was like, if you study revolution and you study the taking of power, you as the mastermind can't be there meeting in dark corners with members of the army about explosives.
Have soldiers. That's right.
You got to have soldiers.
That's right.
But this is the thing about Walter Rodney is that he did not believe that there was he was no armchair. He was not sitting on anybody's armchair, and he would not ask anybody else to do what he wouldn't do. Right. So I think. But
that's a flaw that we can learn from.
I think we can learn from it too. But also, it's like, so with the intellectuals, so like I'm very much about like, okay, get off the chair, get out of the ivory tower, get in the community, do all of that work. But there also needs to be critical work done so that we can understand our situation and we can articulate what our situation is,
agree.
so that we can actually have the intellectual foundation so that we can all link arms and agree, all right,
We have to
this
learn
is
from
enough.
our history.
We absolutely have to learn from our history,
and that's the
including
point that you're
mistakes.
making.
Yeah.
And I agree. We're going to make mistakes, but we have to learn
Absolutely.
from those mistakes.
Absolutely.
And make new mistakes. And Natalie is working to bring the conscious person out of the negative person. I like to say, you got to bring the black man out of the colored man. And her works is actually doing it. She's saying that this guy is muzzled. Even with his mouth all wide open, he's muzzled. This man has made a decision to whereas that he would be muzzled no more. He don't care that these people are concerned about this black man coming out of the colored man. We're saying that it is time for us to realize our humanity to the degree that it may be realized. There's a hierarchy of needs. And at the top of that hierarchy, it's self-actualization. We may not ever 100% realize who we are, but we should work to achieve self-actualization to the degree that we can. So join me this evening, 6 o'clock, Matter Walker Building, to listen to and buy Natalie's book. And the name of her book is A Mouth is Always Muzzled. You've been listening to After Naked Truth. I am your host, Elder Mmoja Ajabu. Unbought, unbossed, and unafraid. Totally unleashed to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the butt naked truth. You know I don't have but one question for you.